My younger brother, Matt, straight up stole my car, and wouldn't you know it, wrecked the thing. Then he had the nerve to start making fun of me about it online. Well, I didn't just let it slide. I took him to court and walked away with $170,000. But before all that drama, let me back up and introduce myself. I'm Noah, 32 years old, and life's finally starting to look pretty good. I'm not talking about being rich or living in some mansion with a view. Nah, for me it's all about my dream car, a jet black 1967 Ford Mustang GT500. Since I was a kid, I've been obsessed with that car. My bedroom walls were covered in posters of it. I collected all the little die-cast models I could get my hands on and even convinced my dad to take me to car shows just so I could catch a glimpse of the real thing. Getting here wasn't easy, though. After college, I landed this low-paying IT job and spent years working my way up the ladder. I lived off ramen noodles and secondhand furniture, skipping vacations, fancy dinners, and anything that wasn't a necessity. I wasn't just saving cash, I was focused like a laser. For over a decade, I passed up every single temptation to make this dream happen. Not just any Mustang, the Mustang. And last month, I finally did it. I bought her. The day I picked it up was like stepping into a dream. The guy selling it, Paul, was this collector from the next city over. His garage looked like something out of a car lover's fantasy. Rows of perfectly maintained classics. And there she was, gleaming under the fluorescent lights like she was fresh off the factory line. Paul had kept the car in immaculate condition, tucked away in a climate-controlled garage. When he handed me the keys, he said, "Take good care of her. She's got a soul." At first, I thought he was joking, but the look on his face told me he meant it. Driving her home was an experience I'll never forget. My hands were gripping that leather steering wheel like it was the last thing holding me to earth. Every rumble of the engine gave me chills. It was everything I dreamed of and more. That night, I parked her in my garage, sat in the driver's seat for hours, and just admired her. I'd run my hands along the smooth bodywork, thinking about everything I'd gone through to make this moment real. A week later, I decided to take her for a proper spin. It was late on a Sunday. Quiet roads, the kind you dream of driving on. The Mustang purred like a contented lion as I cruised down these winding country lanes. For a little while, it felt like I'd left all the stress of life behind. And then, out of nowhere, this old pickup truck came flying at me, wrong side of the road. I swerved hard, tires screaming, and ended up sliding into a ditch. My heart was racing, hands shaking as I checked the damage. Miraculously, I was okay, and so was the car, at least as far as I could tell. But the truck, it didn't even stop, just sped off into the night, leaving me stranded. I called a tow truck and waited in the dark, standing in the cold with my dream car stuck in the mud. The tow truck guy, Rick, a gruff, no-nonsense type, showed up and took one look at the scene. "You're lucky, kid," he said. "Could have been a lot worse." The next day, I couldn't shake what had happened. Why was that truck driving like a maniac? So I went back to the spot and found something odd, a shattered side mirror lying in the ditch. It wasn't from my car, so it had to be from the truck. Figuring it might be a clue, I took it to the local police. The officer I talked to, Detective Harper, was sharp as a tack. She took the mirror and said, "We'll see if we can match this to any vehicles in the area." A few days later, she called me back. "We found the truck," she said. "It belongs to a guy named Mike. He's got a history of DUIs." Relief and anger hit me all at once. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Well, he's denying everything," Harper said. "Claims he wasn't driving that night. We're still investigating." While the police were doing their thing, strange stuff started happening. I noticed this guy hanging around my neighborhood, always in a different car. Sometimes an old sedan, sometimes a motorcycle. But it was definitely the same guy. One night, I finally worked up the nerve to confront him. I grabbed a flashlight and headed toward his car. But before I could reach him, he sped off, tires screeching into the night. The next morning, I found a note stuck under my windshield wiper. It read, "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." That's when I knew this wasn't just about a car crash anymore. I took the note to Harper, and she looked genuinely worried. "This isn't just about the accident," she said. "You might have stumbled onto something much bigger." All I wanted was my car and some peace. But it felt like my dream had turned into a full-blown nightmare. A few days after the note on my windshield, someone broke into my garage. They didn't take anything, but they made a mess, ripped open boxes, tossed my tools everywhere, and worst of all, they keyed the Mustang. Seeing that scratch along the side of my car, it was like someone had sucker punched me. I wasn't going to let this slide. I installed security cameras and doubled down on locking everything up. Then one night, the cameras caught someone snooping around the garage again. This time I was ready. I grabbed a baseball bat and went outside. The guy was wiry, with a scar running down his cheek. He froze when he saw me, but then bolted. Adrenaline was pumping as I chased after him. I managed to grab his jacket, but he slipped right out of it and took off. Inside the jacket, I found his wallet. His name was Sean, and guess what? He was connected to Mike, the guy who owned the pickup that almost wrecked me. I handed the wallet over to Harper, and she started digging into Sean's background. Turns out, Sean and Mike weren't just some random troublemakers. They were part of a local gang that ran stolen car rings. My Mustang wasn't just your dream car, Harper said. To them, it's a big score. They probably didn't expect you to fight back, she added, but now they're spooked. I didn't care if they were scared. I just wanted my life back to normal. This whole mess had turned my sanctuary, my dream car, into a magnet for chaos. And even though I'd sacrificed so much to make this dream happen, I started wondering if it was all worth it. But giving up? That wasn't even on the table. I'd worked too hard to get here, and I wasn't about to let these guys take it from me. A week later, my mom asked me to bring the Mustang to a family barbecue at my Uncle Rick's house. She was so proud and wanted to show everyone how well her son was doing. I wasn't thrilled with the idea. I mean, my car is my pride and joy. Letting it sit unattended in a driveway full of kids, food, and people who don't always respect other people's property? Yeah, that didn't sit right with me. But it's Mom, and it's hard to say no to her. When I pulled into Uncle Rick's driveway, the place was already buzzing. Kids were running around screaming, the adults were huddled in groups with paper plates stacked high, and then there was Ben, my cousin. He's 3 years younger than me and has always been a bit of a disaster. He's the guy who shows up late, drinks too much, and somehow turns every situation into chaos. I hadn't seen him in a while, but his reputation? Still as fresh as ever. The second I parked, Ben came strutting over. He whistled loud enough to make everyone turn and stare. "Damn Noah, look at you, man," he yelled, slapping the roof of the Mustang like it was some old beater instead of a pristine classic. My jaw tightened, but I forced a smile. "Yeah, thanks," I said. "Just got it a few weeks ago." "You gotta let me drive it," Ben said, his eyes lighting up. "Not a chance," I shot back, keeping my voice firm. "Aw, come on," he laughed, half joking. "What's the point of having a car like this if you're not gonna share?" I ignored him and went to greet the rest of the family, hoping he'd get the message and drop it. For most of the afternoon, things were fine. I kept my keys in my pocket, made sure the car was locked, and stayed close enough to keep an eye on it. Ben, to his credit, seemed busy with the keg and a game of cornhole. But at some point, I lost track of him. It wasn't until I heard the unmistakable roar of the Mustang's engine that my heart dropped into my stomach. I spun around, and there was my car speeding down the street with Ben behind the wheel. My stomach twisted as I watched him swerve, barely avoiding a parked car. I sprinted to the driveway, yelling after him like an idiot. My mom rushed over, panic written all over her face. "What's going on?" she asked. "Ben," I shouted. "He took the car?" The next 20 minutes were pure chaos. I was pacing, furious and terrified, while Uncle Rick tried calling Ben over and over again. Every call went straight to voicemail. "This is bad," Rick muttered. "Real bad." Then my phone rang. A stranger's voice was on the other end. They told me my car had been in an accident a few miles away. My chest tightened. "Ich bin okay." I asked. "Is he okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. "He's alive," the man said. "But you need to get here now." Rick and I jumped into his truck, and I spent the drive with my thoughts racing as fast as my heartbeat. When we arrived at the scene, it was worse than I could have imagined. My Mustang was crumpled against a tree, the front end smashed like a crushed soda can. The sight hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment I thought I might throw up. Ben was sitting on the curb, blood trickling down from a cut above his eyebrow. He looked dazed but alive. A cop stood over him, clearly frustrated. "This your car?" The officer barked as I approached. "Yes," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "And that's my cousin. He took it without my permission." Ben glanced up at me, his face caught somewhere between guilt and defiance. "I was just trying to take it for a spin," he mumbled. "Exactly," I snapped. "You didn't think." Before I could unload all the anger boiling inside me, the officer cut in. "We're going to need statements from both of you," he said firmly. The next hour passed in a blur of questions, paperwork, and frustration. Ben was taken to the hospital to get checked out, and the Mustang was hauled off to a nearby lot. Watching my dream car being towed away, beaten and broken, was like watching a piece of myself being dragged down the road. This car wasn't just a thing. It was the result of years of hard work, sacrifice, and relentless focus. And in one reckless moment, Ben had destroyed it. Back at Uncle Rick's house, The tension was so thick you could feel it in the air. Everyone knew what had happened, but no one wanted to talk about it. My mom tried to console me, but her words fell flat. "At least Ben's okay," she said softly. I nodded, but the truth was I didn't care about Ben at that moment. I cared about my car. The next day, I went to see the Mustang at the lot. The damage was even worse up close. Bent front axle, crumpled hood, engine probably shot. The insurance adjuster didn't sugarcoat it. "This is going to be expensive to fix," he said. I couldn't even look at the car without feeling sick. All I could think about was how easily this could have been avoided if Ben had just respected my boundaries. But Ben? He didn't do boundaries. He never had. Later that week, Ben showed up at my door. His arm was in a sling, and he looked genuinely remorseful. "No, man, I don't even know what to say." "I screwed up," he said, his voice shaky. I stared at him, trying to decide if I even wanted to hear his apology. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I asked finally. "That car was everything to me." "I know," he said, his voice cracking. "I was stupid. I'll make it right. I swear." "How?" I demanded. "Do you have 50 grand lying around to fix it?" Ben looked away, his face pale. "I'll figure it out. Just please don't hate me." I didn't answer. I couldn't. All I felt was this crushing sense of loss. Not just for the car, but for the trust that had been shattered. Ben wasn't just my cousin. He was family. And now, I didn't know if I could ever forgive him. For now, the Mustang sits in a repair shop, waiting while I try to figure out what to do next. Every time I think about it, part of me wants to scream, but another part of me wonders if this is just another test, a way to see how much I'm willing to fight for the things I love. What I didn't expect was how the accident would create a rift in my family. The crash was bad enough, but the aftermath? That was worse. People started taking sides, and things got messy fast. Aunt Linda, Ben's mom, called me the day after the accident. I figured she was calling to apologize on his behalf, to at least show some remorse for what her son had done. Instead, she started with, "Noah, don't you think you're blowing this out of proportion?" I was so stunned I couldn't respond at first. Blowing it out of proportion? I finally managed. "He stole my car and totaled it. How am I supposed to react?" Linda sighed, her tone sharp. "Look, Ben didn't mean any harm. It was just a joke. You know how he is impulsive. He didn't think it through." "A joke?" I said, my voice rising. "A joke is hiding someone's car keys, not stealing their car and wrecking it. Do you even realize how much damage he's done?" "I know it's bad," she said with a heavy sigh. "But it's not like he did it on purpose. He's already beating himself up over it. Do you really need to make it worse?" I hung up. I couldn't deal with it. This wasn't just about the car. It was about respect. And apparently, some people in my family didn't think I deserved any. That weekend, my mom insisted on hosting a family meeting to clear the air. "If we don't talk this out, it's just going to fester," she said. I didn't want to go, but she wouldn't let it go. When I arrived at her house, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Most of the family was there, cousins, aunts, uncles, even a few second cousins who usually skip family gatherings. Ben was sitting on the couch, arms still in a sling, looking like a kicked puppy. Aunt Linda sat next to him, arms crossed, her expression defensive. As soon as I walked in, Uncle Rick stood up. "All right, let's get this started," he said. "Noah, we all know you're upset, and you've got every right to be. But I think we need to hear both sides of this." "Both sides?" I said, incredulous. "What side is there to hear? Ben stole my car, crashed it, and now I'm out thousands of dollars." "I didn't steal it," Ben mumbled, staring at the floor. "Borrowed it." I snapped. "You didn't ask. That's not borrowing, that's stealing." Okay, Aunt Linda cut in. "Can we not use words like stealing? It was a mistake. A stupid, impulsive mistake." "Exactly," my cousin Sarah chimed in. "Ben didn't mean to crash it. He was just trying to have a little fun. Don't act like you've never done something dumb." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "This isn't about doing something dumb," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is about respect. He didn't respect me or my property, and now I'm the one stuck with the consequences." "Maybe if you hadn't flaunted the car so much, he wouldn't have been tempted," Linda said sharply. That hit a nerve. "Are you serious right now?" I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I worked for over a decade to buy that car. I wasn't flaunting it. I was proud of it. And now it's destroyed because your son couldn't keep his hands to himself." At that point, my Uncle Mike, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke up. "Linda, you're out of line. Noah has every right to be upset. If this were Ben's car, you'd be losing your mind." Linda glared at him. "It's easy for you to say, Mike. Your kids aren't perfect either. Don't drag my kids into this," Mike shot back. "We're talking about Ben and what he did. And frankly, he's lucky Noah hasn't pressed charges." The room erupted into chaos. voices talking over each other, some defending me, others insisting it wasn't a big deal. Sarah and Linda kept pushing the narrative that I was overreacting, while others, like Mike, stood firmly in my corner. Then my grandmother, who rarely spoke at these gatherings, raised her hand. "Enough," she said, her voice firm. The room fell silent. "This arguing is getting us nowhere. The fact is, Ben made a mistake, a big one, and Noah has every right to be angry. But we're family, and we need to find a way to move forward." "Move forward," I said bitterly. "How am I supposed to move forward when half the family thinks I'm the bad guy for being upset?" "No one thinks you're the bad guy," my mom said, trying to mediate. "We're just saying that holding on to anger isn't going to fix anything." "Then what will?" I asked. "Because all I see right now is a totaled car and a cousin who refuses to take responsibility." Ben finally spoke up. "I'll pay for it," he said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "I don't know how yet, but I'll figure it out. I know I messed up, and I'm sorry." For a moment, the room was silent. Then Linda put a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to do that, Ben. It was an accident." "Yes, he does," I said firmly. "If he's really sorry, he'll find a way to make it right." The meeting ended without any real resolution. Some of my relatives gave me sympathetic looks as they left, while others avoided me entirely. Linda didn't even say goodbye. Over the next few weeks, the divide in the family became even clearer. Uncle Mike and his family checked in on me regularly, offering their support. Sarah, on the other hand, started posting passive-aggressive comments on Facebook about people who hold grudges over material things. My mom tried to organize another gathering to smooth things over, but I refused. "I'm not sitting in a room with people who think I should just roll over and let this go," I told her. Eventually, Ben did start making small payments toward the repairs. They were sporadic, and while I appreciated the gesture, it didn't erase the damage, either to my car or to our family. Every time I saw Linda or Sarah at a family event, the unspoken tension between us hung in the air like a storm cloud. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, Ben took things to a whole new level of immature. He went public on social media. It started on a quiet Monday morning. I was at my desk, going through emails when my phone buzzed. My friend Adam had tagged me in a post. Curious, I opened it and my stomach dropped. There was a photo of my wrecked Mustang, smashed against the tree. Ben had posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Who knew Noah's midlife crisis would end so quickly? Guess the car couldn't handle his ego." I felt a surge of anger and embarrassment. It wasn't just that he'd posted the photo, it was the mocking tone. That Mustang wasn't just a car to me. It represented over a decade of hard work and sacrifice. And now, my failure to protect it was public entertainment. Within minutes, the post started gaining traction. Ben's friends and some of our mutual acquaintances were commenting with laughing emojis and sarcastic remarks like, "Next time, maybe stick to a bicycle." Others tagged me, asking if it was true and if I'd seen the post. It felt like a slap in the face. I called Ben immediately. He didn't pick up, so I sent him a text. "What the hell are you doing? Take that post down now." His reply came a few minutes later. "Relax, it's just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." I couldn't believe it. After everything Ben had done, stealing my car, wrecking it, tearing the family apart, he had the audacity to mock me publicly. And then he acted like I was the one overreacting. Every fiber of my being wanted to drive over to his apartment and confront him, but I knew I'd probably say or do something I'd regret. Instead, I called Sarah, who always seemed to defend Ben. "Did you see what he posted?" I asked, my voice shaking as I tried to keep calm. She hesitated for a moment. "Yeah, I saw it. And you're okay with that?" I pressed. "It's just Ben being Ben," she said, her tone dismissive. "You know he doesn't think before he acts. Honestly, maybe you should just laugh it off. It's not like he's wrong, it's just a car." That was the last thing I needed to hear. "It's not just a car," I snapped. "And this isn't funny. He's humiliating me in front of everyone." "Well, maybe if you stopped being so uptight about the whole thing, people wouldn't find it so entertaining," she said before hanging up. I was seething. No matter what Ben did, there were always people willing to excuse his behavior. I decided to take the high road, or at least what I thought was the high road, and ignored the post, hoping it would blow over. It didn't. The next day, Ben doubled down. He posted a series of Instagram stories featuring the wrecked Mustang, each with mocking captions. Noah's 10-year savings plan. 1. Save every penny. 2. Buy dream car. 3. Wreck it in 1 week. One story even had a poll asking his followers, should Noah quit cars for good? The options were yes, and hell yes. By now, my phone was blowing up. Friends, coworkers, and even distant relatives were messaging me. Some were sympathetic, but others were clearly enjoying the drama. Even my boss, Mark, pulled me aside at work. "Hey, I don't want to pry," he said, lowering his voice. "But is everything okay? I saw something about your car on Instagram." It was humiliating. I couldn't even escape the situation at the office. That night, I decided I couldn't let this go on any longer. I drove to Ben's apartment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. When he opened the door, he looked surprised to see me. "Noah, what's up, man?" he said, grinning like nothing was wrong. "What's up?" I said, my voice cold. "Are you serious right now, Ben? You've turned my life into a joke for your followers. Do you even realize how much damage you've done?" He rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. It's just social media. No one's taking it seriously." "I'm taking it seriously," I shouted. "You've humiliated me in front of everyone we know. You've crossed every line. And for what? Likes? Comments?" His grin faltered, but he still tried to brush me off. "Look, if it bothers you that much, I'll take the post down. But you need to chill. People aren't going to remember this in a week." "I don't care about a week from now," I said. "You've made it clear you don't respect me, my property, or my feelings. I don't even know why I'm still talking to you." For the first time, Ben seemed genuinely taken aback. "What do you want from me, Noah?" I said I'd pay for the repairs. "What else do you want?" "I want you to grow up," I said, my voice firm. "And until that happens, don't talk to me." I left before he could respond. For the next few days, I avoided social media entirely. I didn't want to see what else Ben might post or read any more comments from people laughing at my expense. I focused on work and the slow, painful process of getting the Mustang repaired. Then something unexpected happened. A few of Ben's posts went viral, catching the attention of people outside our circle. At first, it was more of the same, strangers laughing at my expense. But as more people saw the posts, the tone began to shift. Some commenters started calling Ben out for his behavior. "This guy worked for 10 years to buy his dream car, and you wrecked it and mocked him? What kind of cousin are you?" One person wrote. Others chimed in, "This isn't funny. It's just mean. You're lucky he hasn't sued you for damages." For the first time, Ben was on the receiving end of the backlash. He deleted the posts and went silent on social media, but the damage was already done. The story had taken on a life of its own, spreading across different platforms. Some people even started tagging me in their posts, offering words of support. It was a small consolation, but it felt good to know not everyone thought I was overreacting. Eventually, Ben reached out to me. He showed up at my apartment unannounced, looking more subdued than I'd ever seen him. "Noah," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway, "I messed up. Again. And I'm sorry." I didn't say anything, waiting for him to continue. "I took the post down," he said. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I thought it was funny. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you." "That's the problem, Ben," I said. "You never think. And I'm always the one left cleaning up your messes." He nodded, looking genuinely ashamed. "You're right. I don't know how to make this right, but I want to try." I didn't forgive him right away. It's hard to forgive someone who's caused so much pain, especially when it feels like they keep making the same mistakes. But I told him that if he was serious about making amends, he could start by paying off the repairs and staying out of my life until he learned some respect. Ben's public bullying left scars, not just on my pride, but on our relationship. I don't know if things will ever go back to the way they were, but at least now I know where we stand. As for the Mustang, it's still in the shop. But one day, it'll be back on the road stronger like me. After everything Ben had done, wrecking my car, mocking me on social media, and dividing the family, I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let this define me. I had no choice but to take Ben to court. It wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. Ben needed to understand that actions have consequences, and I wasn't going to let him off the hook this time. Deciding to sue wasn't easy. I knew it would create even more tension in an already fractured family. Half of my relatives believed Ben was an irresponsible fool who needed to face the consequences of his actions. The other half, led by Aunt Linda, insisted it was just a mistake and that I was blowing things out of proportion. But this wasn't about pleasing the family. It was about standing up for myself. My dream car, my pride and joy, had been destroyed because of Ben's reckless behavior. His hollow apologies and half-hearted promises to pay for the damages weren't enough. I started by consulting a lawyer. My friend Adam recommended Marcus, a no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for being thorough and relentless. During our first meeting, Marcus listened intently as I laid out the entire story. He nodded along, taking detailed notes as I explained how Ben had taken my car without permission, wrecked it, and then mocked me publicly on social media. "You've got a strong case," Marcus said when I finished. "We'll go after him for the full cost of damages, including repairs, diminished value, and emotional distress. And those social media posts? They'll help us. They show a clear lack of remorse. Hearing Marcus use the word theft made me pause. I hadn't thought of it that way before, but he was right. Ben had stolen my car, and it was time to hold him accountable. When the lawsuit was filed, word spread quickly. Aunt Linda called me in tears, accusing me of tearing the family apart. She begged me to drop the case, saying Ben didn't mean to wreck the car and was already sorry for what he'd done. This isn't just about the car, I told her. It's about respect. Ben needs to learn that he can't just do whatever he wants without consequences. Linda didn't take it well. You're being heartless, Noah. He's your cousin. I hung up, exhausted and frustrated. My mom tried to play peacemaker, but admitted that Ben had crossed too many lines. You're doing what you have to do, she told me. It's not like he left you any other choice. Preparation for the case was intense. Marcus left no stone unturned. He gathered every piece of evidence we could use. The police report from the night of the accident, photos of the Mustang's damage, screenshots of Ben's mocking Instagram posts, and even text messages where Ben admitted he'd taken the car without permission. The repair shop's estimate for the damages came to over $40,000. On top of that, Marcus calculated the diminished value of the car. Even with perfect repairs, a classic Mustang with a history of major damage would never be worth as much as one in pristine condition. Marcus also pushed for compensation for emotional distress, arguing that Ben's social media antics had publicly humiliated me. The weeks leading up to the court date were tense. The family was more divided than ever. Uncle Mike, who had supported me from the start, called to check in. It's about time someone held Ben accountable, he said. If Linda had been tougher on him when he was younger, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Others, like Sarah, doubled down on defending Ben. She posted vague but pointed messages on Facebook, accusing me of being materialistic and petty. It stung, but I couldn't let their opinion sway me. When the court date arrived, I felt a mix of nerves and determination as I walked into the courtroom. Ben was there with his lawyer, Jason, a slick-looking guy who seemed far too confident. Aunt Linda sat behind them, her arms crossed, glaring daggers at me. On my side were my mom, Uncle Mike, and Adam, who said he wouldn't miss the showdown for anything. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, got straight to the point. Marcus presented our case first, methodically laying out all the evidence. He described how Ben had taken my car without permission, driven recklessly, and caused significant financial and emotional harm. He even played a slideshow of Ben's Instagram posts, each caption more mocking than the last. With each slide, the judge's expression grew colder. When it was Ben's turn, his lawyer tried to downplay the situation. Jason argued that it wasn't theft, but a misunderstanding between family members. He painted Ben as a well-meaning but impulsive young man who'd made a mistake. Ben took the stand and repeated the same excuse. I didn't mean to wreck the car, he said. I just wanted to take it for a quick drive. I thought Noah would understand. Marcus wasn't having it. Do you think your social media posts mocking him showed any understanding? He asked pointedly. Ben didn't have an answer. He just looked down at his hands, clearly uncomfortable. After hours of arguments and testimony, the judge finally delivered her ruling. She sided with me, ordering Ben to pay the full cost of damages, including repairs, diminished value, and emotional distress. The total came to just over $60,000. Hearing the verdict was a mix of relief and vindication. For the first time in months, I felt like justice had been served. But the victory came at a cost. Aunt Linda stormed out of the courtroom without speaking to me. That evening, Sarah posted a long rant on Facebook, accusing me of being cruel and ruining Ben's life. Despite the backlash from some family members, others reached out to show their support. Uncle Mike called to congratulate me. You did the right thing, Noah, he said. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As for Ben, he avoided me entirely after the ruling. I didn't expect Ben to pay the full amount right away, but Marcus assured me that we could enforce a payment plan if necessary. More importantly, I felt like I'd finally taken a stand, not just for myself, but for the principle that people should be held accountable for their actions. The repair shop had already started work on the Mustang. While I knew it would never be the same, I also knew it would eventually be back on the road. In the meantime, I focused on moving forward, even as the tension within my family lingered. It wasn't the resolution I'd hoped for when this all began, but it was the best I could do after everything Ben had put me through. Filing the lawsuit had felt like stepping into uncharted territory, but I knew it was the only way to make Ben take responsibility. The mounting evidence in my favor gave me hope, and I braced myself for the grueling process ahead. Marcus, ever thorough, was determined to build the strongest case possible. He reached out to everyone involved and dug deep into Ben's history. That's when Ellie, Ben's sister, reached out to me. We met at a quiet coffee shop, where she confessed her frustration with Ben's lifelong habit of dodging accountability. Ben's always been like this, Ellie told me, shaking her head. Mom and Sarah enable him every time he screws up. They just sweep it under the rug. I think it's time someone called him out. Ellie shared stories from their past that painted a clear picture of Ben's reckless behavior. From borrowing and damaging friends' cars to neglecting responsibilities at work, he had a long history of carelessness. Her testimony was a turning point, reinforcing the idea that this wasn't a one-time mistake, it was a pattern. Then came a breakthrough. Marcus discovered security footage from a homeowner's camera that had captured the crash. The video showed Ben driving at an irresponsible speed, swerving wildly, and ultimately losing control of the car. Watching the footage made my stomach churn, but it was undeniable proof of his recklessness. Adding to the growing pile of evidence were screenshots of Ben's mocking social media posts. Each caption was a reminder of his lack of remorse. Marcus presented these as clear indicators of the emotional toll Ben's actions had taken on me. By the time Marcus compiled everything into a detailed presentation, even I was shocked by how much evidence we had. It became painfully clear that Ben's actions weren't just a single reckless decision. They were a reflection of a deeper pattern of disrespect and carelessness. When the judge reviewed the surveillance footage, it became the nail in the coffin. The video left no room for interpretation. Combined with Ellie's heartfelt testimony and the mockery in Ben's posts, the case against him was airtight. The judge's verdict came swiftly. Ben was ordered to pay $175,000 in damages. This included the full cost of repairs, the diminished value of the car, and compensation for the emotional distress his actions had caused. While I felt relieved and vindicated, the financial and emotional toll still weighed heavily on me. With insurance refusing to cover the damages since the car had been taken without my permission, I had to pay $155,000 out of pocket to get the Mustang repaired. Each payment felt like a painful reminder of the trust that had been shattered. The impact of the judgment rippled through the family. Aunt Linda was furious, claiming I had ruined Ben's future. Sarah doubled down, making it her mission to defend him at every opportunity. On the other hand, Ellie, Uncle Mike, and a few others quietly supported my decision, understanding it was necessary to hold Ben accountable. As the weeks passed, Ben's reputation began to crumble. Friends who once laughed along with his antics started distancing themselves. His usual bravado gave way to an unfamiliar silence. For the first time, Ben was facing the reality of his actions. Months later, Ben surprised me by writing a handwritten letter. It was raw, unpolished, and sincere. He admitted to being reckless, selfish, and thoughtless. He acknowledged the pain he'd caused. "You were right to take me to court," he wrote. "I needed to be held accountable, even if it took this to make me realize it." I appreciated the gesture. It was a small step toward amends, but the scars of his actions remained. Forgiving him was one thing. Rebuilding trust was another. While I doubted our relationship would ever be the same, I took the letter as a sign that he was beginning to understand the weight of his mistakes. Over time, I worked to regain my financial stability. The Mustang, now fully repaired, was back in my garage. It wasn't the same as it once was, but it became a symbol of resilience, a reminder of the hard lessons I'd learned. Eventually, I decided to sell it. The money went toward a sleek, modern vehicle that represented a fresh start. Driving down an open road in my new car, I found myself reflecting on everything I'd been through. The journey had been painful and exhausting, but it had taught me invaluable lessons about standing up for myself, setting boundaries, and understanding the true cost of trust. I was ready to move forward, leaving the wreckage of the past behind me.